Welcome to this panel, which has the title of Shedding Light on Investment Opportunities Between Lebanon and Oceania. My name's Rick Mitri. And I will just take you through the procedure today. I'm going to invite each panelist to answer one question, and then after their answers, we'll have a 5-minute question and answer session, and we'll do that twice again. I'd like to particularly welcome Dr. John Hewson, who, as you know, needs no introduction in Australia. Dr. Hewson is a former Australian politician who was a candidate for Prime Minister in 1993 federal election. His career is multifaceted as an economist, banker and businessman, politician and journalist. Presently, he's a professor at Australian National University and a foundation director of Macquarie Bank. He's the chairman and director of ABN AMRO Australia, and he's mostly known for being the best Prime Minister Australia never had. The topic he will discuss is the development of trade and commercial relations between Australia and Lebanon, and others as well. Mr. Nabil Itani, next gentleman in the panel, is come all the way here from Lebanon to be with us on this panel. And he is, of course, the chairman and general manager of IDA, which is the Investment Development Authority of Lebanon, and which is Lebanon's national investment promotion agency. If you have a look at some of their guidelines and some of their guides about investing in Lebanon, they're just magnificent. I recommend that you have a look at it on their website. He's had this position since 2005, and he is by profession an architect and has designed landmark projects in Australia and the Arab world. His topic will be creating linkages between Lebanon and its diaspora. Dr. Anthony Hashem, the next panelist, was born in Australia and raised in Lebanon. He's a highly regarded engineer and businessman, director and founder of the Australian Consulting Engineers with offices around the globe. And I'm proud to say he's also a renowned philanthropist. His topic will be the position of the Lebanese Diaspora in construction industry in Sydney. Fouaz Sankarid, the next person on the track is on the panel is Fouad Dairy. Now, if you drove from the city today, you would have seen some skyscrapers built in Redfern, each one about 20 stories high, and one of them is still developed, and that's being built by Fouad's company, Daycorp. Fouad is the founder and managing director of Daycorp since 1999. He's overseeing development and construction of various projects totaling over $1.5 billion. He's also involved in numerous community and charitable foundations, one of the most notable being Camp Quality. Mr. Dairy continues to grow with the development and construction industry, providing innovative and sustainable solutions. His topic will be investment opportunities in Lebanon. And last but not least, certainly at the end of the panel, is Mr. Fouaz Sankari. He is the Executive General Manager of Commercial Banking, Bank of Sydney, the Chairman of Al Nouri College and Vice Chairman of the Australian Arab Chamber of Commerce and Industry. He's also the Treasurer, it says here, of Sydney University, but I think it means Treasurer. And of the Sydney University Australian Lebanese Foundation. He has served on committees reviewing major proposals in banking, trade and education, which have had positive ramifications in Australia and Lebanon. Would you please welcome the panellists? Now, if I can start with you, Dr. Hewson, my question is, what do you see as the way that Australia and Lebanon can develop trade and commercial relations?
I must say in the last day or so I had a quick look at the data in terms of trade and investment two-way, and I must say I was really surprised at how undeveloped it is. I'm surprised at the focus of the trade in particular, mostly on beef and other agricultural products, not a lot of investment, and I'm just surprised that there hasn't been much greater investment in services, for example. You've seen some in financial services. We have an example at the end there, in the Bank of Beirut, but we haven't seen too much in terms of what you might have expected. I was trying to think of the last trade mission from Australia to Lebanon, or vice versa, and I had trouble thinking of it. I don't know how many Australian ministers have actually made the effort to try and develop relationships with Lebanon. I suspect not many. As far as I could see, I went back a fair way, I couldn't think of any significant initiative in that respect. So I think if you just take that sort of view, there's endless potential across the board. I mean, I guess one of my interests today, which is one of the reasons I suppose I'm here, is I've been working with a group to form the first, well, to broaden Islamic financial services in Australia and hopefully get a licence in the name of the Islamic Bank of Australia. Of course, a competitor to the Bank of Beirut, I guess, eventually. But, you know, the potential for that sort of initiative in this country is very significant. I mean, over many years in this country, we've obviously been built on immigration. And I think our greatest success as a nation since the Second World War is to build a very tolerant, multicultural, multiracial, multi-ethnic, multi-religious society. But in that sort of process, there's a natural maturation. I mean, it's a work in progress. We need to work at it continually. And you see tensions come from time to time, particularly political tensions, which need to be dealt with. But I think from my point of view, developing Islamic financial services is a part of that maturation process. And the opportunities for dealing with the Muslim community of Australia, who are looking for Sharia-compliant finance, I think is a very significant opportunity, as well as, of course, a platform to provide more broadly based financial services. So Sharia-compliant services and more broadly based financial services. I mean, the number of people who identify in this country as Muslim is understated, I think, in terms of some people being hesitant to declare their allegiances, but there's no doubt in our survey work that there's a lot of interest in the development of financial services for those people, for the Islamic community in general, and more broadly, our surveys have shown that a lot of those who are dealing presently with the Big Four would quite happily shift to another bank if they had the opportunity. So I think the potential in that, as a specific example, is really quite real. But more broadly, I think the opportunities are very significant. And as I mentioned before, I think in services, I've obviously spent a large part of my life in academia. I'm surprised at the undeveloped nature of the university link, say, between Australia and Lebanon. And that can be a multi-stage sort of process. We can send students there, we can bring Lebanese students here, we can exchange faculties, we can run programs in Lebanon and so on. All sorts of opportunities which I see from a university point of view are quite undeveloped. So I'm pretty positive about the potential if we decide that that should be a strategy. And it'll take a bit of government leadership, a bit of business leadership through the Chambers of Commerce and so on, but also individuals, and there are a few on this panel that can actually make a big difference.
Good, thank you very much, John. Dr. Itani, could I ask you to introduce IDAL's services and achievements to date?
Okay. Thank you. First of all, I want to express my pleasure to be with you, with such a community. It is a fact that we are far, but we are close in some areas. The Investment Development Authority of Lebanon, IDAL, is an authority, governmental authority, is a public sector. It is under the patronage of the Prime Minister. Its main mandate, it has two main mandates. One main mandate, the first one, is to encourage capitals to invest in Lebanon, to simplify for the investors to do business with Lebanon, is to connect with all the potential investors that might invest in Lebanon. The second mandate is to promote for the products from some productive sectors, because also all our services in IDAL are dedicated to some target sectors, which are the productive sector, mainly the tourism, the agriculture, agro-industry, industry, technology, information, telecommunication, and media. These are the sectors that the government has indicated that these are the target sectors that we want. We are looking for sustainable job creation and for regional development. For this, lot of programs, lot of incentives are given to the potential, beginning from the market intelligence. Our authority is the authority responsible for dismantling all the information related to the investment, the social, economic, finance, everything related to build a visibility study with a credible and new information. It's our mission to dismantle it to anybody through our website or through the connectivity with each other. We are so close. You can connect us easily if you enter our website, Invest in Lebanon. You can see what there is a lot of information is common. It is on the website, where some may be special or dedicated for any investor related to the cost of doing business, or everything related to do business in Lebanon. We can connect through our chat room or with direct connectivity. This is mainly the first. Second is the administrative support for the investor. We, as an authority, we have the capability and the authority to give any investor the support administratively, because let us be frank, and you know, Lebanon, maybe some obstacle here or here. Our authority is to simplify for the investor issuing the permits, the licenses, everything related to the governmental ministries or any governmental bodies. We are the only contact. We have the one-stop shop to do on behalf of any investor these licenses. The third service is to provide for the investor, when he decided to invest in Lebanon, a package of incentives, beginning with tax exemptions for maybe reach to 10 years, anything related to fees, reduction of some fees. There is a lot, and you can see it in our website. Depending on two main criteria. And these criteria varies through the sectors that I mentioned. This criteria is the size of investment that will be, and second dimension is the job creation. Because as I said before, we are looking, all these services are free. That's why we are looking for job creation, because we have a shortage, we have an unemployment rate. We are looking to occupy this vacancy. The second mandate, it is to promote the product sector. From this product sector, the products to be exported, to open new markets, to be connected to the world. That's why we have some programs dedicated for agriculture, for agro-industry, for ICT. We took the platform and in the international fairs for our producers to go there and to interact with the world community. This is in brief. We have outside a booth, and we can explain more and more about our incentives and our services.
Thank you, Dr. Itani. Dr. Hashim, can you tell us what has been your experience about the position of the Lebanese diaspora within the construction industry in Sydney?
Well, good afternoon, Rick and fellow panelists. It's my pleasure to be here today and to participate in this panel. I'd like to extend a special thank you to Mr. Gibran Basir and for all his efforts with the LDE and for bringing this finally to the shores of Australia. It's an occasion that we've been waiting for a long time. This is a topic that I'm specifically very passionate about, construction, and this is a domain that I work in. And if we sort of look at the position of the Lebanese diaspora in general from the early 1900s, and where do we stand. Listening to His Excellency yesterday mentioning that the first Lebanese who set to our shores was Masoud al-Nashabi al-Fakhri, landed in Adelaide in 1854. And if we look statistically to a journal that was issued by the UTS in the early 1901, it indicated that 80% of the Lebanese immigration were mainly concentrated in the field of commerce, of sales, of goods. And not a lot of that changed towards the 1950s. Another study showed that almost 60% are still either employers or self-employed. So the Lebanese diaspora in general, they have that sense of entrepreneurship and leadership. In the 1960s and 70s, the construction industry was mainly dominated by, I guess, other European immigrants who landed on our shores. In the late 60s, we started having a lot of influx of the Lebanese immigration into the shores of Australia, specifically Sydney. So from that point of view, a lot of these immigrants started in the construction industry. And that led to the flourishment of the Lebanese in that domain. And we could see that they were really fairly dominant towards the 90s. At the beginning of the millennium, they were really sort of starting to take command of the construction industry within the Sydney Basin, generally within Western Sydney region. And I'm very pleased to say that in the last sort of 10 years, in the last decade, they've really sort of taken control, and they can be considered in the Western region of Sydney to be the pioneering force in the construction industry. I guess the census of 2016 have about 170,000 occupants of New South Wales being of Lebanese descent, specifically born in Lebanon. And if we take into consideration the people that are born in Australia of Lebanese heritage, the census shows that that's close to about 350,000 or thereabouts to 400,000 people. Also, the census shows that the highest concentration of this Lebanese migration that came into Australia was concentrated in New South Wales, seconded by Victoria, obviously. And the Australian Bureau of Statistics shows that there's close to about 190,000 employees that directly work in the field of construction. And also that statistics show that there's close to about 18,000 of Lebanese heritage. So therefore makes it around 10% of the people that directly work in the construction industry. But these figures don't take into consideration, though, the number of workers that work in the industry to the companies that are in the construction industry. And as you sort of mentioned, we have on our panelist, Mr. Fuad Deary, the CEO of Daycorp, which is one of the construction companies out there, which are one of the most prominent, I guess, of Lebanese heritage. Just to name a few, we have Dildam, we have Holdmark, Daycorp, Topplace, Dasco Construction, Growth Build, Buildcorp. So we have a lot of companies, and if you consider the amount of workers that work with these companies that contribute to the construction industry, I'm fairly pleased to say that that number would show that the contribution of the Lebanese diaspora in the construction industry within the Sydney Basin would be close to around 40-odd%.
Good, thank you very much. Anthony? Now, Fuad Deary, you commented that investors from outside Lebanon wanting to invest in Lebanon are a bit perturbed by or can be distracted by the Lebanese political instability. If you were speaking to an Australian, a Lebanese investor wanting to invest in Australia, what would you characterise the Australian political system as?
Well, thank you, Rick, and thank you for the panel and for all those who have organised the LED. Interesting question. If you look at sort of investments in Lebanon, and Lebanon, as we know, has had some political turmoil, which creates a bit of an instability. Here in Australia, we've got the opposite. We've got political stability, which makes Australia a lot more desirable for people who want to invest in Australia. And I think one of the most important things in investing in Australia is understanding, understanding the markets, understanding the governments, understanding the systems that we have here to enable investment to be fruitful. But then on the other hand, I mean, I look at Lebanon at the moment, we all know that Lebanon has a lot of gas and oil reserves, and I think if you look at that, overall, I think there's plenty of opportunity for a lot of investment for people, even in Australia, to invest in a place like Lebanon. And I mean, I look at our own country here in Australia. In 2008, during the global financial crisis, Australia came out of it almost unscathed. And one of the reasons Australia came out of it unscathed because our government was sensible enough and smart enough to understand we had a mining boom. And rather than splurging the money and wasting money, they paid off debt. So at the time the global financial crisis hit, Australia had no debt, which enabled Australia to then borrow money to start building infrastructure, to start building roads, hospitals, start building resources to enable the country to get out of the global financial crisis. And I say that when you look at Lebanon, and if we've got the gas reserves and we've got oil reserves in Lebanon, if the Lebanese government is smart enough and able to operate, to use that to its advantages, where the country is benefiting from these reserves, where they can pay off debt, to enable the country to prosper from, building roads, building infrastructure, building hospitals, building schools, that will create more opportunity for people who want to invest in Lebanon, which is exactly what happened here in Australia. When Australia came out of the global financial crisis and it was untouched, it opened up the opportunities for countries like China, who were pouring billions of dollars into Australia because they saw it as a safe haven, they saw it as an opportunity where Australia will continue to grow. And I say the same thing about Lebanon. I believe, and I am of Lebanese heritage. I'm Australian born. I'm very passionate towards Lebanon, and I have invested in Lebanon myself. But I think, through the opportunity of the gas and oil reserves that Lebanon has, I think it will create. I think it will create some opportunities for investment in Lebanon.
Thank you very much, Brad. Now, Fawaz, the establishment of the Beirut Bank in Sydney has been an interesting development. How easy is it to deal with the Bank of Sydney / Bank of Beirut? And are they the one and the same?
Thank you, Rick. Thank you for the question. Firstly, I'd like to thank the LDE for the opportunity to be on the panel today, and also like to acknowledge that these events can't happen without obviously the sponsorship, and I'd like to acknowledge the Bank of Beirut and the Bank of Sydney for being the major sponsors of this event. For any event to be successful, I think you need to have sponsors that are supporting these events, and I think the Bank of Beirut and Bank of Sydney see extreme value and immense value in partnering with these events. In terms of Bank of Beirut and Bank of Sydney and how easy it's still with us, I'll just give a little bit of background on how long Bank of Beirut's been here in Australia, what differentiates us, but also what we offer. In terms of Bank of Beirut, they decided to come into Australia back in 2011. They purchased a full banking licence and fully ADI'd institution with the view of expanding their presence, not just globally, but outside of Lebanon, with a view of de-risking the bank's risk, and they decided that they would like to at least get to 40% of their business to be outside of Lebanon, and they decided to pick Australia. In terms of the Bank of Sydney, where we play a role in the market is we're a boutique bank, very flexible and nimble and very easy to deal with. We offer products within the residential market. Just mentioning with our resi side of things, we've won the cheapest home loan for 2 years running So we're very competitive in the residential space. We're also very strong within the corporate world in construction, commercial property investment, and our other area is in international trade, whether it's imports or exports, which is where we assimilate within what Bank of Beirut's very strong at, which has been one of the strongest trading banks in Lebanon. So that's more around our lending products, but also it's interesting to note that although we're very competitive in the lending space, the deposit products for the past couple of years have also been the most competitive in the market, offering very unique and high interest rates when it comes to our deposits. So when it comes to dealing and how easy is it to deal with the bank, we've got 16 branches here locally in Australia, 10 in New South Wales, 5 in Victoria and 1 in South Australia. We also got rep offices in both Queensland and WA, and we are very excited in terms of the past 6-7 years and where we're heading in terms of our growth. So I feel that both with our local presence, with our branches, while all banks at the moment are looking at contracting and closing their retail presence in the market, the Bank of Sydney, as of this week, has opened another branch within New South Wales up in Chatswood. So if you're around there, please visit. But I could say that the bank's future aspirations is definitely to grow the bank and open more retail branches. And also, a couple of weeks ago, we launched our new internet banking system, both online and in the mobile apps, and I encourage you all, if you haven't had a chance to go into our website, to please do so. Thanks, Rick.
Well, thank you very much, Fawaz.
Thank you, Rick, and yeah, welcome to everybody, and I really want to add my congratulations to the Lebanese Minister for bringing this to Australia. I've attended twice in Lebanon, and it's been a really opening eye event, and let's hope that we can walk the talk, that a lot of the talk happens. And particularly I'm interested in the gentleman that spoke about oil and gas industry in Lebanon, and Nabil might want to respond to this as well, because unless we can get that oil and gas industry moving in Lebanon for the benefit of the Lebanese people, and I really mean that, for the benefit of the Lebanese people, so that we can actually stop importing all the oil and gas. Having electricity 24/7 would make a huge difference to developing businesses in Lebanon, because without that, without proper electricity systems, without proper water systems that operate for 24/7 and provide people with the surety that they can run a business successfully, then it's going to be very, very difficult to convince some people to put their hands in their deep pockets and really advance Lebanon and reduce the employment, Nabil, that you talk about, because it's very, very adamant that it must happen, but it can only happen with the will of the Lebanese government and pushing that oil and gas industry as hard as they can to benefit the Lebanese people.
Yes. Any more questions from the floor before we move on? Good, thank you. Could I ask you, John, just on that point, Dr. Yusin, of the oil and gas, what can Australian investors do to help the development of the oil and gas fields in Lebanon and in the Mediterranean? How can it activate it or contribute to its activation?
I guess the only way I can think of is the way our banking community might invest directly or indirectly in it. I mean, as you know, it's a very active debate in this country to move away from oil and gas towards solar and wind energy. And I must admit, one of my major projects is 24/7 baseload solar thermal in South Australia. So I'm not the right person to ask about that. But I do understand that if you've got a national asset that is being held back and not being developed effectively, I mean, it does take some leadership from the government to encourage the investment that would be required. I mean, there was obviously a lot of investment going into the world in the gas and oil industries. But if the political environment is seen as unstable, if there's no clear sort of longer-term direction and security, it's very hard to finance these projects. It's hard to get people to want to put their hand in their deep pocket and take the risk. Because, you know, we find that in this country I guess we're much more stable politically, but we still have the same issue. When you go to a banker and you say, would you fund a 10 or 15-year project? They say, well, so what certainty do I have that the change of government won't change the policy? And it's those sort of issues that are fundamental to actually getting longer-term investment in any country.
Could I just follow that up, Doctor? We know that our neighbour in Israel is trying to put its hands on a little bit more of the oil and gas, and some people think they should. Is there anything the Australian government can help in that regard?
Well, the Australian government has not taken any sort of clear positions on a lot of these issues. I mean, I guess they say they're second-order issues and we don't want to take a position and take a risk. But I do think that given the multicultural nature of our society, that it is beholden on governments to take some of these views. I mean, I'd like to see a much more active, as I said, attitude in terms of government in this country to the Lebanese community and the contribution that Lebanese people or people of Lebanese descent have made to this country. I mean, you've made some very good points about the significance of the construction industry, and there's no doubt that a lot of the development we've seen around Sydney would not have occurred without that Lebanese influence. But for the government to go a step further and say, well, let's really develop proper relationships between Australia and Lebanon and look at the mutually beneficial investment, two-way investment, for example. I mean, you don't see that sort of level of leadership in government today. And there is a bit of a tendency to favour Israeli issues over other issues. And I don't want to take sides on that. I'm going to say that I observe it, and I don't think it's necessarily a sensible way for a country like Australia to go.
Good, thanks. Thanks, John. Mr. Oceania, you might want to make some comments in that regard as well, but I wanted to ask you as well, in the light of current events in the region, how is the government and IDAL encouraging its diaspora to invest in Lebanon?
Thank you. But before I have to ask to answer this question, I have to say something, to clear something, because about what is raised now, about the opportunities now. Oil and gas is one of the sectors that has an opportunity, and it's going on. But it is the time to invest in the infrastructure in Lebanon, because our infrastructure needs so investment. And now the government has the reform plan and has a conference in Paris in 6th of April with a plan of 18 billion. The main actor, the main thing in this plan is the PPP, is the public-private partnership. And that's why all of you is encouraged to invited to be a part of this plan. Now in Paris will be the conference CEDR 1, which the whole community, the international community will be there, and this is a supportive conference for rebuilding Lebanon in the infrastructure, but not a donation and not grants and not loans. It is part of this from the World Bank, but the main part is from our private sector and mainly from domestic and our diaspora. That's why you are invited to be a part of this plan. Second, as our diaspora, how we encourage our diaspora to invest in Lebanon, and what are the investing in Lebanon? Mainly, really, it's not it is not a mathematics problem. It is a kind, first of all, from Lebanon, investing in Lebanon, it is the easiest to access the market. It's located in the Middle East area. It's open policies through from our independence. We have this market economy, and you have the easy to access the market of around at least 300 million population there. From Lebanon, it's easy to access the human resources We have a treasure there. If you invest in Lebanon, you can depend on a really a human resource, skilled human resources, which has the capability to do something. In Lebanon, it's easy to access finance because we have a deposit in our banks, which is equivalent around 4 times of our GDP. And we have a program, we have subsidies for the productive sectors to do business. We have a lot of programs in the financial issue. It is so easy to access to the finance if you want to do business. And it's so easy to access the raw materials from Lebanon and from that's why these facts we have in Lebanon. If you look about the graph, despite of what happened and what's happening now in the Middle East area, Lebanon is the only country who maintained its position as an investment destination for the investors. We ranked the 4th in the region after Turkey and the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. But compare our GDP to there, you can imagine, because our size of investment size that we encourage really, it is equivalent around 5% of our GDP, where nobody, no country in the region can reach this percent. That's why we have a lot of things that we are doing with our diaspora. Now we have some programs for them exactly because we know after our contribution with the LDE through 4 years, we took around all the world and we met all our diaspora all around. We know now what is needed. Some of them, mainly, or most of them, wants to contribute with the development of their regions. That's why our new program, which we launched, I think, in LDE Beirut, is to the program called One Cluster, One Zone, One Cluster, One Sector, which have to brand each region with a special product. This region, which belongs to you, you can mainly develop or contribute to the development of this cluster that lead to a new trend of connecting the market and branding the region with a brand of product. As an example, all the countries now is going in this trend. In Japan, they call one village, one product. We are calling it one cluster, one sector. It is to brand every region with a sector or two sectors that may be famous in the international market in this. As an example, if you want to deal with a high-end clock or watches, what do you think? Geneva. If you want to deal with flowers, you can say Holland, Amsterdam. That's why we are going in this direction for the regions that you belong to, and you have to be a part of this development plan, which will, in one hand, you have the visibility, win-win situation, you are investor there, and the population have the opportunity to have some job creation, more job creation.
Thank you, Nabil. Anthony, you were able to comment on what influence the Lebanese diaspora in the construction industry has had on the economy of, number one, Australia, and number two, Lebanon.
Well, as we mentioned earlier, the Lebanese diaspora in general has contributed a lot to the economy of Australia. And one of the main sectors is the construction industry we spoke about. They didn't only really inject employment into the industry, but more jobs, more employment. That cash is going to basically infiltrate within the economy, and it's going to be able to benefit both the local Australian economy and also the overseas Lebanon economy. And why I say that, because I guess the previous session before us, they were talking about close to 14 million Lebanese immigrants around the world, where the population of Lebanon is only 4 million or 4.5 million. And I'm really proud to say that out of those 14 million immigrants around the world that are scattered maybe in about 167 countries around the globe, the Australian Lebanese diaspora is one of the most connected diasporas to Lebanon. They might be the most distant away geographically, but they are the most connected. And therefore, the construction industry and the money that can be generated through the construction industries that are related to the Lebanese diaspora can eventually find its way within the local Australian market and find its way outside to the Lebanese market. And just to shed a bit of light on this, I mean, we've been so, I guess, lucky. This is called the lucky country, that we've had 26 years of uninterrupted growth. We haven't gone into a recession, even though the major countries all around the world went into recessions in the global financial crisis. We've got AAA credit rating all around the world. We've had, over the last 10 years, on average, a growth of about 10%. The GDP of Australia is about $1.5 trillion or thereabout. New South Wales, coming back to the Sydney market, New South Wales generates close to about a third of that GDP. So we're talking about our GSP being close to about $500 billion. And the construction industry within the state of New South Wales is one of the most prominent. And I guess the statistics tell you that this is close to about maybe $50–60 billion that directly is injected from the Sydney market and the New South Wales sort of market in general. So when we look at that, plus the statistics and the numbers we talked about where the Lebanese diaspora bring in close to around 40–50% of that market, then we can see the numbers are quite staggering. We're talking close to around $15–20 billion of generation into the Australian market, which eventually will find its way into the Lebanese market.
Thank you very much, Anthony. I've got to say I agree with you that the Lebanese community in Australia is probably one of the communities around the world, Lebanese communities around the world, that is highly conscious of its obligation to strengthen the already strong relations between Australia and Lebanon. I know that in my everyday movement around the community, I know how aware they are of the need to continue the strengthening of that relationship. And I noticed that the Minister for Foreign Affairs, Mr. Gibran Basir, has joined us. It's lovely to have you and to see you here with us and to give us the encouragement we need to continue. Thank you, Minister. Could I now ask, Fuad, what investment hurdles do you think the direct investment by Australia in Lebanon and direct investment by Lebanon in Australia, what are the hurdles to that?
Look, I think the hurdles are just understanding the markets, understanding the governments. You know, as I said earlier, you know, Australia has stable government, we've got stable policies, and you know, one of the biggest hurdles is when you're investing, whether it's in Lebanon, is understanding what the governments are doing and what their policies are doing. And you know, having a stable government like we have here, we enjoy that stable government, and sometimes we forget how stable it is. And as Anthony said, we've enjoyed I think Australia's now the longest consecutive country without a recession since '92, so that's 26 years. And that's been brought about by stable government, and the governments here are working for the people. The governments here are answerable for the people, and the governments here in Australia, you know, their decisions they make is for what's right for the country. And so the biggest hurdle for anyone trying to invest in Lebanon is understanding what the markets are doing over there, or understanding what the government or government policies. And same within Australia. Those that want to invest from you know, Lebanon into Australia, they've got to understand our markets and understand our policies and understand what the governments are doing and trying to do. And the comment I made before about the sort of gas and oil reserves, one thing Australia did well, when we knew we had a mining boom. We knew it wasn't going to last. And as Dr. Houston was saying earlier, the world's now changing, and gas and oil will no longer be, in 20 years, will probably become obsolete. So while there's an opportunity, to just, utilise that, and that's what Australia did. We utilised our mining boom to pay off debt. So then when we needed to get into debt, to build roads and infrastructure, we had the balance sheets to do it. So from my view, the biggest hurdle for anyone investing is understanding markets and understanding the government and government policies.
Good. Thank you very much, Fuad. Fuad, what differentiates the Bank of Sydney compared with other banks in Australia helping the diaspora deal with Lebanese banks?
I think the first key differentiator is that we're the only Lebanese-owned Australian bank in Australia, and I think that in itself gives you the indication that our Lebanese shareholder in Bank of Beirut has got extreme vision in terms of their expansions outside of Lebanon. In terms of Bank of Sydney, we are what you call a true relationship bank. And what I mean by that is that every customer in the Bank of Sydney has a relationship banker. Very few banks today have decided to keep that model due to its probably cost inefficiencies. And the bank has stood solid in terms of remaining to be a true relationship bank. And what we mean by being a true relationship bank is accessibility. And one thing that we see here in Australia in terms of customers' key frustration is not being able to contact their banker when they require them. In terms of our accessibility, our bankers are located not only within branches but also go out and visit our clients face-to-face on a daily basis. But not only do we have our relationship model, we're also very big players in community. And what we mean by community is how we choose and implement our support within the community. Yes, we are a Lebanese bank, but we're also an Australian bank. And one of our key successes to date has been our support of our local communities. And in the times where you see the major banks pulling funding out of communities, the Bank of Sydney is fully committed to our relationship model and our community. We have exceptional strength in understanding who our community is, who our community leaders are, and spending the time to understand the community needs, which really does integrate well with both business and community. And when you understand your community, you understand the business needs, and the bank has been very successful in implementing that.
Good. Thank you very much, Fawaz.
Thank you very much for the panel members for this very valuable kind of discussion. I've got a very small question. I didn't hear anyone talking about the national debt, the Lebanese national debt, and its impact on or encouraging others to invest in Lebanon. So I would like to have a comment from maybe Mr. Itania about what are the plans that the current government is having to manage this debt, which is almost close to $85 billion now. Thank you.
Dr. Itani, can you make a comment on that?
Not exact, but I know that there is a lot of actions taken against this fact. Yes, it is a fact. Now the new there is a lot of things, mainly the reduction of our expenses. Now we have a decision from our government to all the ministers to reduce all the expenses by 20%. Some actions related to the debits through the banks to do a new reform for this. But this is something, as you said, it is something against the investment climate, against what's happening. But for us as Idan, we have the mandate to encourage to the other. Now, as I said, the government for the public sector is doing the CEDAR 1 in April, this month, the second month. This will help to pushing after the capitals from the private sector with the under the law, PPP law, which is a private public partnership, and this will lead to some reducing the debates. But it is a long story for these debates. I think this government is going in the right track.
Thank you, Nabil. Fawaz, as our banker on the panel, do you have any comments on that?
Look, I think we mentioned earlier in terms of Lebanon's resources, when you look at the gas and oil industry, I think it's quite obvious that I think the Lebanese government have a bit of work to do when it comes to getting out there on the road and with their trade missions to be able to get some investment into Lebanon. I think everybody would agree Lebanon, in terms of perception, unfortunately, due to the area in terms of the region that it sits in, can be unattractive in terms of investment. But whilst the Lebanese government can try and attract, whether it's delegations into Lebanon, I think it changes people's perceptions very quickly. I've got many friends who are not Lebanese who have gone to Lebanon and have come back after they've visited after a short time and said it's nothing what we thought it would be. And I truly believe that whether it's the foreign minister, I know he's got a huge job on his hands to be out there on the world stage to be able to attract that investment. But I think that's where, whether it's private or whether it's public, there is great opportunity to invest in Lebanon. And I think the reduction in that huge debt, I can honestly see that maybe in the next 10, 20 years, there's going to be a huge shift in terms of Lebanon and its economy, we hope.
Rick,
yes, please, Anthony.
I've got a small little comment to make on that particular sign. To a certain extent, Amir Sainati touched base earlier. Lebanon has been and will always be the gateway to the Middle East. No doubt about that. We have the mental resources, we have our position, we have the government constitutions that make it open to whoever to come to invest into the country. I'm going to talk just quickly also, putting another hat on, which is the, on the board of director of the Australian Lebanese Chamber of Commerce. And here again, I'd like to thank them for their support to sponsor this event. But again, we have been active, very, very active in the last 4 to 5 years. It is unfortunate with what's happening around that region. We know that it's very unstable at this stage and what's happening around our neighboring country, Syria. But nevertheless, this will come to an end. We really strongly believe that Lebanon will be the gateway to rebuilding Syria and rebuilding that whole region. And therefore, that's why the ALCC has taken a very active role in actually taking trade missions constantly to Lebanon from Australia to really look into investment within Lebanon and to basically try to assist one way or the other. Now, our colleague asked the question earlier. I don't think it's going to be a very easy way to recovery. The debt is huge in comparison to the GDP of Lebanon. But I believe that with the local government and with the current government in place, doing the right things and putting the right actions into place with the position of Lebanon, and that will all lead towards hopefully moving towards reducing that debt and also getting ourselves out of this hole we're in.
Thanks.
Fingers crossed.
Anthony? Is there any other questions or comments from the floor? Yes, please.
Thank you for having us here and getting everyone on board. I've got an important question as a family man of 4 kids. Every time I go to Lebanon, which is I love, I find the youth unemployment is a major problem in Lebanon. Therefore, again, the manufacturing. We tend to export a lot of our talent abroad. Many nations, like this great country of Australia, benefiting of our kids. What does the government have in place to reduce unemployment, particularly youth unemployment? I mean, I am a member of Liverpool Council. Although we're a local government, but we do have big emphasis on unemployment. Generates disposable income. If we have people employed, go out and spend. So the dollar goes around. I wonder what, nobody talks of unemployment, which is the engine room of the economy. So could you please maybe give us some ideas there?
Yes, please, Nabil.
Yes, it is true. And now, it's true plus because of what's happening for the refugees from Syria and the competition between our workers and but the government is looking for this issue. It's not since the declaration of this government, which takes into consideration this issue and make many activities. One of the activities are done with IDAL. IDAL now, last month, we launched the business support unit. A unit only for youth, for startups, just to encourage not only for employment, but for entrepreneurship. We can, because our economy, 85% is small and intermediate enterprises, as you say. That's why, to encourage these youth to be entrepreneurs, not only employee and searching for a job outside or inside Lebanon. A lot of these actions, one of them, as I said, in IDAL, one in the Ministry of Telecommunication as a fund for these startups. All the system, since the declaration of this government, which put in the vision that supporting the regional development and the youth through the entrepreneurship. A lot we can discuss if you are interested in such many items that we did and the government is doing.
Can I also, Rick, just mention as well, it's a great question and it's something that is really important. I know a lot of people look at employment as a key factor in any economy, but in terms of the banking and finance sector in Lebanon, it is very strong. They are very well respected around the world. If I can mention, Bank of Beirut has over 60 branches in Lebanon, which employs youth. They've got many graduate programs, apprenticeships, which assists in the economy. And obviously, you mentioned that you go to Lebanon. I encourage everybody in this room to go to Lebanon, to keep spending in Lebanon, and it'll get the banks to go bigger and employ more people. So keep going to Lebanon. Thank you.
Could I have the last question of the day to Dr. Rashid, the Director of the incoming Islamic Bank of Australia?
Okay, assalamu alaikum and good afternoon to all of you. Thank you very much for giving the opportunity. Thank you, Dr. Hewson. He is, of course, our board member. And Mitri, thanks for coming and thanks for the LDA. My name is Dr. Rashid. I act as a Director Secretary for the group Islamic Bank Australia Project. Our group called IBA Group. B stands for bank, so obviously there's no secrecy of it, but we cannot use the word bank because we are yet to be licensed. This is disclosure. When we say Islamic Bank Australia, we will do almost every product in the market, but without involving interest. It's only for information. So it is like you can take, we are selling kebab. Some people goes to kebab because it is tasty, but some people goes to kebab shop because it is tasty and halal. And that is what we will be doing. So compare us with the kebab shop. This is for information, and thank you very much. If you have questions, you can ask Dr. Hewson. He's one of our director in the group. Thanks. This week, we are launching our InfoMem, Information Memorandum, for collecting investment. I think it's the right opportunity for us to work probably together with any opportunity of those who are seeking investment in Australia, which is, of course, a very attractive destination for growth and productivity and what we call quality asset in Australia. So hopefully we do well, and hopefully we would be able to serve our clients as we envisage. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That's a very good way of combining a question with promotion.
Yeah, great.
Can I ask one more question? And I spoke to you outside about this, Dr. Hewson, and I think all of us, all the hard work that's been put into this Diaspora conference, and all the preparation, the magnificent preparation of LDE, people such as, and I commend people such as Shah bin Nasser on his highly professional, highly detailed and insistent and perseverant work that you've done, and the magnificent achievement of the Minister's initiative in getting this far. But how do we let the product of this manifest, instead of we have a big talk here and then we all go home, and what happens after that?
Well, it is difficult. I mean, I've been aware of some of these efforts in a number of different communities around Australia, and they always feel disappointed and disenchanted at the end because it doesn't seem to make that much of a difference. But I think it's a process of building. I mean, this shouldn't be the last. This shouldn't be an end in itself. This should be the beginning of what should be a process to draw the broader Australian community into an understanding, if you like, of the possibilities that do exist between Lebanon and Australia. And the point that was made about how when tourists go to Lebanon, they come back with a different view. There is an image, unfortunately, in our media as to Lebanon and some of the difficulties in Lebanon, and they get exaggerated. And yet the potential for Lebanon as a gateway, as our colleague said here, to the future. Very difficult period, obviously, with what's happening in Syria, what's happening in the broader Middle East, and so on. But the potential in a medium-term sense is very good. So in that sense, I think it's just a question of continuing to find ways in which you can use events like this, trade missions, encouraging the Australian government to sponsor a trade mission, or vice versa, from Lebanon to Australia. These sort of things can raise it. But it's got to be a concerted effort over a longer period of time to actually be successful in this sort of thing. And, you know, I've had an experience in politics of banging away. One of my colleagues once said to me, you know, you never stop repeating it. You might say it once, you might say it 100 times, you might say it 5,000 times. And suddenly somebody will stop you in the street and say, what about? And you say, now that's a good idea. It comes back to you. So you've got to build it. And so you just keep running the argument, building the infrastructure, making the points, and it will come good. Build on the success of the construction contribution to Australia, for example. I don't think people really understand just how significant that's been, both as an investment and as an employer. And in those circumstances, I mean, it's just a process of continuing to do more of this and to find other opportunities like trade missions and education missions and cultural missions and so on, two ways to start to change people's attitudes. So it is about attitudes and it is about understanding more than anything else, I think.
And I think, Rick, I just want to add, coming back to what Gus was saying before about youth unemployment, and we're talking about debt and all this stuff, and look, and I'm no expert when it comes to Lebanese politics, nor do I ever proclaim to be one, but I think one of the biggest problems that Lebanon has, and we're so fortunate we don't have here, that not many people have touched on, but Lebanon has a population of just under 4 million, but yet our refugees in Lebanon are almost, 40% of the population. Okay. And while you've got a refugee crisis like that, the Syrian refugee, that's adding to a lot of youth unemployment, that's adding to that, and obviously, this is not a solution that can be resolved in 5 minutes, but it's something that the Lebanese government needs to do, and it needs international help from international countries to assist and sort out the refugees problem, because until that's resolved, Lebanon is going to struggle to continue to move forward.
Can I just add to that? Yes, I think one of the greatest challenges of the world today is immigration, mass migration. What's concerned me in the last couple of years is every single country's elections in Europe have been turned basically on the immigration issue, the refugee issue and the immigration issue. And the result is that they're getting a very nationalistic sentiment, starting to close borders and make it increasingly difficult to deal with that problem at a time where there's something like 65 million displaced persons in the world. Now, you need a global solution to that, and some countries are bearing a disproportionate burden in that respect, and Lebanon's a classic example. Perhaps because of location, perhaps because, you know, borders are being closed in broader Europe, and that's not good enough. And that's an argument that's just got to be had, I think, internationally. Sorry,
Absolutely.
Minister.
And that's what also pushes, you know, it's an international problem, and that's what pushes away investment in Lebanon.
Exactly.
You know, when you look at, as I said before, you know, 40% of the population of refugees are on top of our population. People don't want to invest in Lebanon, and it's an international problem, and it needs to be addressed.
Well, I'd like to move a vote of thanks to you. You've been a great audience, but particularly to the Minister for his magnificent initiative, for the organisers of LDE, and to our esteemed panel. Thank you.